Andrew.
What's going on, Matt?
Not much. Here we are. I finally got to drag you out to travel with me.
Hey. I'm excited. And it's my first time being able to go visit Wautoma Lodge, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, they got a nice building up there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Good Feast of St. John's.
So I've been meaning to go to a Feast of St. John's for a while because was it in one of our earlier podcasts that I made a big stink about we need to be doing St. John's
right.
feasts and like talking about in Spain how they were having fires on the beach and that, you know, a lot of Masons around the world have bonfires, do all sorts of stuff. So Masons are celebrating, you know, the 24th. So tomorrow, technically, around the world. Tomorrow from today, now when this comes out. But so then ever since then, everyone's like, hey, Andrew, you know, you're making a big stink about this, but you haven't gone to any of the St. John's
Right.
events. And I was like, I know, I need to.
Right.
So here I am, going to St. John's Day.
And here we are doing our first podcast from a car.
Yeah, call this Matt and Andrew Travels.
Right, Matt and Andrew Travels.
Yep.
I like it.
Doing some car
Grammatically,
content.
it's terrible, but...
Oh, you're right. It should be Andrew and Matt Travels. You're right.
Sure, that works, but it's more the plural on the travels doesn't really work. I would say Andrew and Matt travel.
Matt and Andrew are travelers.
Or that. I'm just saying, got to get that grammar right. Isn't that one of the 7 liberal arts?
Yeah, that's one of the several liberal arts that I'm the most bad at. You can see the badness in the descriptions of the episodes. Anyone who's ever texted me gets frustrated with my grammar. And to be fair, I'm not bad at grammar. I'm just a lazy typer.
Fair.
I just,
that is fair.
And just click send. I never
usually the
proofread.
one that cleans up the show descriptions.
That's what the balance is supposed to be. That's why you're supposed to review it after I post it.
Yeah, well, stop posting them at midnight when I'm already in bed.
Maybe you should be awake if I'm awake. If I'm editing, you should be awake waiting.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I get up multiple hours earlier than you.
Yeah, just 3 hours later, you can pop up easy.
All right, we should probably run the intro and get on wherever the road is going to take us for this episode. See what I did there? See what I did?
The winding road. Cool, let's hit it.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right. So I figured we got some road time and, you know, we were talking about chatting. I do want to start us by talking a little bit about St. John because that's where we're going right now.
Right.
If you'll indulge me.
Yeah, of course I will. I started reading what you sent me. I just didn't have time to get through the whole thing.
Yeah, I was doing some research, and I've always known, like, the gist, but I find that a lot of podcast episodes talking about the St. John kind of rehash a lot of the similar stuff, which is great, and we're probably going to do a little bit of that.
Right.
But there's some interesting things that I found that I did not know and had not heard about the St. John.
Ooh, do tell.
So, traditionally, historically, a lot of stonemason guilds were actually dedicated to just St. John the Evangelist.
Okay.
So that was a common trend, and sometimes he was occasionally called the patron saint of stoneworkers due to that association. And over time, when there was the separation from the ancients and the moderns, that's where we get the line, some were dedicated to King Solomon. And the reason is that the moderns wanted to make it a little less Christian focused and a little more open. So they said, we'll go to Old Testament or the dedicated to the building of Solomon's temple.
Right.
So it's a little more inclusive. And so in some places in Europe, they're still dedicated to King Solomon, whereas in the U.S., they always kept it to St. John, which around the 1700s grew to include St. John the Evangelist, and then it turned to the St. John's.
Right. So what you meant to say, I think, before was it started as St. John the Baptist and then grew to include the Evangelist.
Yes, that's what I meant,
Yeah.
St. John the Baptist. And, you know, traditionally, the reason being, since, you know, it doesn't, you don't have to be a Christian to value the symbolism behind it, what it's trying to teach. And what I always found interesting is the juxtaposition between the two guys.
Right.
And so, you know, we all kind of know, well, maybe you hadn't, that St. John the Evangelist's feast day is in December.
Right.
Right around the solstice. And St. John the Baptist is tomorrow, which is close to the summer solstice.
Right. Right. Exactly. Which we actually just had a few days ago, so it's pretty good timing.
And so they think that part of the reason that they like St. John the Evangelist and this date specifically, it is the date
Baptist in this date.
The Baptist, yeah. I'm going to keep mixing up my Johns.
Oh, no, I do it all the time, too. But since I read what you said, I keep pounding into my head that June, the longest day of the year, is dedicated to St. John the Baptist.
Yep. And that's the day with the most light.
Yep.
And Masons love light.
Oh, of course we do.
But yeah, it's an interesting symbol. I'm wearing a little pin with the circumpunct.
Nice.
On my lapel, or on my collar. And what's cool with it is, you know, looking up, the way I first started looking at this when I was like entered apprentice, I was like, who are these guys? Like, I'd heard of them, right, in some of the story. But St. John the Baptist, besides being the forebringer, who was doing baptisms before Jesus' ministry, he basically died standing up for what he thought was a just cause.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is kind of known for not only his fidelity and his justice and righteousness, so he kind of represents the truth side of our tenets.
Right.
And then St. John the Evangelist was more of a studious, philosophical, and a brotherly love type of character. He was called the one Jesus loves the most, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also charged with taking care of Mary after Jesus' crucifixion. Okay. So kind of like a take care of widow type of vibe.
Right.
And so when you look at them both in juxtaposition, you have one must necessarily be truthful and just, and also I would argue that John the Baptist chose fortitude because he lived with skins and ate cockroaches and had like a very circumscribed life.
Well, it was locusts and honey, right? Isn't that what it was a major part of his diet, right?
Yep, because he was an ascetic.
Yeah.
So on his side, it's more like zeal, fortitude, justice, but his sin would have been his passions to a certain extent, even though he circumscribed them.
Right.
He was kind of a fiery dude. Whereas John the Evangelist was a little more subdued, philosophical, and loving. And then you have usually the holy writings at the top, meaning that between your guide, you must bounce between, basically the tenets of Freemasonry.
Right. And keep yourself within due bounds. Right.
Yep.
And, there's also something to be said for St. John the Baptist and the fact that he was the Baptist, so he purified by, like, water, right? Mm-hmm. And, which is an initiatic experience, which is similar to what the degrees of Freemasonry are, which is
what
an
initiatic, they intend to do.
Right. And then what they intend to do. That's a better way to put it. It's an initiatic experience, right?
Yeah, and it represents, like, moral purity, like our white aprons, too.
Right.
And he also was not naked nor shod because he would just be wearing very minimum clothing and be like in a very low status of clothes because that's what he was as an ascetic.
Right.
Which kind of also can, you can see that reference being put in there. But yeah, I think they're an interesting symbol.
They definitely are, and I mean, going to these feasts, like last year I went up to this one that worshipful brother Adam Rigdon, who's been on the podcast a few times, puts on, and he did an excellent job with it because he tried to kind of do some food that would, he didn't give us locusts and honey, but he tried to come up with some more so fare that they may have been eating back then or similar to, right? And did a nice education piece with it, and I actually really got to learn a lot about St. John the Baptist, and I honestly feel like this is the one of the two that is easier for us to celebrate, considering that the other one usually falls on December 27th, I believe, and everybody's tied up with Christmas and family and everything
Usually it's
else.
installation season.
And installation
Which is kind of fitting,
season.
too.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, this is definitely the more fun of the feast days.
Right. Summer, not the middle of winter.
Yep. But when you think about it, like, what's cool is that they are put on the two pillar ends. So it's all about, like, the juxtaposition between the two characters, right?
Right.
So on one side, you have, like, zeal, justice, and knowledge, and love of truth. On the other side, you have passion, philosophy, reason, and brotherly love. And they, like, temper each other.
Right.
On both ends. And so you're looking at, like, summer and winter.
Yep.
The highest light and the beginning of the light being created, right?
Because your shortest day
Yep.
is your winter solstice, right? So.
And then you're looking at, you're just seeing, like, the whole circumscription of the passions being a duality. Like, you have to ride between, to be a good man, you have to ride between the extremes. So it's almost like in our obligation where we say, reprehend with justice. What's the other one?
Oh, you mean in the charge?
Yeah, the charge.
Admonish with candor.
Yep.
And
something with
admonish
friendship.
With candor, reprehend with justice. I can't remember.
I haven't done a charge in a while.
I haven't done a charge in a while either.
I used to know this off the top of my head.
I feel like it's right there, and I just can't get it from my brain to my mouth.
You are to admonish with friendship, reprehend.
Admonish with candor.
Admonish with candor.
Reprehend with justice.
And something with friendship. But it's still that juxtaposition. Like, you still have to be just, but then you also need to temper yourself with kindness. Like,
right.
And so it kind of has, like, that same vibe to it. This, like, duality of some of these good traits, like justice, fortitude, courage. They can be bad traits if they're not tempered by some of the other traits that they need to be done within one another.
Right. Well, everything in moderation to a certain extent, right? Like, it's great to be courageous, but if you're courageous to the point of stupidity, it's not going to do you. You become reckless, and you're not going to help anybody really, and probably end up hurting yourself, to be honest.
And if your justice loses compassion, it becomes too sterile, and it's like, is this understanding the nuance of what? Are you actually giving someone their due?
Right.
Or are you, making it too black and white that it becomes a sickle, a sword instead of a scale?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think, I'm excited to be going to St. John's Baptist Feast Day. I really want to see one day districts start to do it. I guess like a big Mason, like mini Mason con.
Right.
Kind of like we always say annual communications, like the big meeting.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if on like a district level, or even like if you could do like a region, like break like 4 districts, like southeastern Wisconsin, middle Wisconsin, and that, and to do a big like outdoor bonfire, like a classic Mason hang. Oh, that'd be sick.
That would be pretty cool. Just to have a good hangout. Try to get it as close as possible to the actual day, right? Like, we're traveling to this one on the 23rd, and the day's the 24th.
Yep.
But, something large like that, you probably have to do on, like, the Saturday closest to,
Yep. It's just like, it's one of these old Masonic traditions that I think you don't see done as often as it should, and, it's pretty awesome that Wautoma Lodge is one of the lodges, and there's a couple others in the state that are now also doing it as well. And I'm not taking credit because my last episode where I threw a fit about it, but I know that I said it started the fit first, and then these events popped up. I'm just saying.
I don't know if Wautoma did this before last year, if this was something Worshipful Brother Adam put into place last year and is continuing again this year, but...
No, they did it. I swear they did it right after the podcast. I got a text from Rigdon saying, hey, we are doing that. And I was like, oh, boy.
Well, he probably had it planned prior to that then, and then was like, hey, just so you know, we're doing it.
I'm going to take credit either way.
Well, of course,
regardless of the truth,
because that's you.
But yeah, it's awesome. How many times have you been up to Wautoma?
To visit the lodge?
Yes.
Oh. Let's see. I've sat in one of their stated meetings. I was at the Feast of St. John last year. Obviously going to the Feast of St. John again this year. Been to the lodge building one other time, I think. Maybe 2 other times. I've been up here a couple of times. So, I see those guys on a regular basis because I'm up here fairly regularly for hunting and other activities. So, but yeah, I've only been to their building a handful of times. Oh, you know what else I was up there for was I was up there for a Silas Shepherd meeting.
Oh, you also went to the car show the other day.
Yeah, we were up for that, but that's not at the lodge. That's at the county fairgrounds. And then I was up here for when Adam did that primary officers training. I was one of the presenters at that as well. So yeah, I've been up here quite a few times then, actually, to be involved with lodge functions. So I would say it's maybe time for me to start considering a plural petition.
It's nice because it's also so close to your hunting cabin. Right. How was the Father's Day car show?
Good. They had 144 cars there, at least. It was a pretty good turnout. They had a bunch of people running their cars on the dyno. From what I hear, it was quite the fundraiser this year. So it did really well. I mean, they had great weather for it. There's a bunch of awesome cars there. My daughter was super into it, which makes me think that at some point here I'll have to buy a classic car for her and I to build. So I'm here for it. I just gotta figure out where I would park it.
Yeah. Well, it looks like you're street parking. You're parking in your driveway, and it gets the garage, I guess.
Right. Got to find one that's pretty beat up, though. Those old muscle cars aren't getting any cheaper these days.
If you could pick any muscle car to start with, what are you thinking in your brain?
So, I would pick something else, but I know what would ultimately end up being there, and that would, because what I would pick is what I like, but I also like the one that my wife would pick, so it's gonna have to be like a 68 Dodge Charger.
Oh, that's such a classic too.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be fun. That'd be a fun family hobby.
Yeah.
It'd be like you're Tim Allen and
right
out in the garage wrenching away.
Yeah. No, I've always wanted to rebuild an old car. I rebuilt a somewhat old motorcycle one time, but I've always wanted to rebuild an old car, and that's on the bucket list of things to do, and I wish I would have pulled the trigger on it years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you didn't do it years ago, the next best time is now. Then you can restore a beautiful car that has gone from east to west, and then you can bring it from west to east again.
Right.
From a rough car to a perfect car.
I'll take it up and I'll put it in the Father's Day car show. There was actually one car there that was a super cool build, and it was an old Chevelle, which big fan of Chevelles. But the dude had a sign by it that actually said the date the restoration was started and the date the restoration was completed, a year and a half apart, dude.
So he just went ham on it for a year.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah. 'Cause that's actually pretty impressively quick to accomplish a restoration project if you're not a huge shop or one of those reality shows that does it in a week,
Yeah, if you don't have a hydraulic lift to pick it up and go. So, what all goes on at the car show? I've never been, besides looking at cars. It looks like it's at the park, or at the county fairgrounds.
It's at the Washera County Fairgrounds, yeah. And they bunch of food trucks, There's a bourbon pull. There's the gun raffle that they draw for. There's 50-50 raffle, all that kind of stuff. And then, a bunch of cars to look at.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they had dyno testing this year, which is always fun to watch guys run their car and see how much power they're putting out.
Oh, sure. What would you say the turnout was?
Really good. I have no clue head count wise, but it was pretty busy. You know, people filter in and out all day. You know, we were there. By the time we got up there, it was like 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, and then we hung out until around like 1 o'clock, and then but we have a 2-hour drive each way with just shy of 4-year-old. So asking her to spend 2 hours driving to look at cars and then drive 2 hours home is,
it's a long day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a cool event in the way that it seems to bring in a lot of the community.
It does. It really does. There's a lot of people that come out for it, and when I first heard about it, I was like, really? A Father's Day car show? And then I was like, that makes sense, though. It's supposed to be Dad's Day. Dad wants to go look at old cars, right?
I feel like it's a good example of, like, we've been talking a lot about doing more events in the community. And, like, when I was growing up, like, when I told my dad that I was becoming a Mason, he's like, oh, we'd go to their fish fry they do, like, a fish fry either every week or every month. I forget what it was. That was, like, that lodge's thing.
Right.
And it was, like, a community event. Everyone in town knew what was going on. People would attend it regularly because it was something they looked forward to.
Right.
And I feel like in modern day, right now, Masonry, some of those, like, community events have kind of fizzled away where, in general, people aren't going to as many of those, like, small town events.
Right.
But, like, I feel like that was a big part of Masonry that we've kind of struggled to reinvigorate again. But it sounds like Wautoma's doing that with that Father's Day car show.
Yeah, no, they do an excellent job putting it on, and from what I understand, it's been growing exponentially over the last few years, which is also amazing to see, right? You want to see these things growing and everything else. Last year, which was the first time I attended, it was a little underattended, but that's sometimes the risk you take. It was a rainy day. It had rained all morning, so people didn't come out with the cars. But this year it was a full house, and that was really good to see. So,
well, and it's cool seeing those type of events where it's like where it's so large that, like, the brothers have complex jobs where you have to have, like, ticket takers, parkers, people helping parking. Like, remember when we were helping at Springer Speedway?
Mm-hmm.
And how, like, Slinger Speedway, and how we had we were up there with a bunch of people from the district, and we had people running carts. You had people helping all over the place. Like, the ground was spread out with Masons everywhere doing stuff. I was like, those types of events are, I think, really cool and something we need to get back to.
Yep. We're going to break the wall here. I need to stop for a pit stop, so I'm going to pause this. And we're back on the road. This lovely 2-hour drive. I mean, we didn't record for the first part of it because we were going through construction and people didn't need to hear what I was saying to other cars.
Yeah, right. There was an interesting dude in that rest stop.
Yeah, there was.
So Matt and I are in the rest stop taking care of business, and this guy walks in and just goes, "Woo! Smells good in here! Woo!" And then we're just screaming, and we're staying in the bathroom like, what is happening? Are we about to get attacked?
Right.
He just liked the smell a lot.
Man, the fun stuff that happens when you just...
Rest stops, man.
Rest stops.
Woo! Smells good in here!
Oh, man.
I thought for a second he was saying it was, like, cold in there, and that he was comfortable because he was coming from the outside and looked like he was a landscaper. No, he just liked the smell.
Yeah, well, it was a clean rest stop, so I got to give Wisconsin credit for that. Most of the time, the rest stops are
scary places,
tip top as far as cleanliness goes.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So, before we took our pit stop, it got me thinking. What do you think? So, what are some good examples we can think of really good community-driven, like, focused events that we know of going around the state? And then let's see if we can brainstorm some ideas of what could be some other ideas that we can think of now. We're trapped in a car think tank.
Trapped in a car think tank. I like it.
So the big ones I'm thinking of is the haunted house up in Rylander.
Yep.
That's a big one that I think is exactly like what I'm thinking about. Is like these good community events.
Breakfast
car
with
show.
Santa.
Yep.
That's something we try to put out there into the public eyes. Open houses,
Yep.
Things like that, where you can bring people in and offer them some free food, and tell them a little bit about Freemasonry, maybe start swaying some of those perceptions.
And see, I like the idea of the open house, and it has its place, but I'm thinking where it's fully community-driven, like, service. Like the car show is another example, where this is an out in the public, aimed at the public, and the public gets excited to go to.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So not something like the park cleanup where we're visible doing community service.
I think the community service lane is another good lane that should be incorporated. Blood drives, park cleanup, stuff like that. I think that's a great lane. I'm talking the one that like people get excited year after year as the community to be drawn in and participate with Masons doing something they love.
Gotcha. I do want to back up for a second to that blood drive though, real quick. Out of all the events I've ever put on, that was, and I know I had a bunch of weird stuff happen with people changing and me getting bounced around between who my rep was in the beginning. But like, when everything goes right, that has to be the easiest possible event to put on.
Yep. I feel like the only thing we can do this year to improve it is try to actually draw in more people. Like the lodge did good showing up for times. And I know there's a limited number, but like you really want to see that draw. But it is still nice to have the truck in the parking lot,
right?
So people can see. And I think it's an easy way. And they always need blood,
right? Well, and I've always said you got to give something 3 years before you call it successful or not, right?
Yep.
And the blood drive was something Lake had done in the past, and then it went away for a number of years. This was last year was our first year bringing it back. We're doing it again this year, as far as I know. And, so let's give it a couple years and see if we can make it a, huge success, and flyer more and everything else. I threw some flyers up,
We also didn't get the marketing material till kind of late this year, too.
I would agree with you there, yeah.
Last year.
Because of that change in person all the time. So, yeah, it made it difficult.
But, at the same time, I think that's another great type of event. I think park cleanups are easy and great. And in that same lane, you can do food kitchen, soup kitchen stuff, volunteer one of those.
Yep.
I always wish we could do that around Thanksgiving, but I found that it's actually competitive to get a chance to volunteer on Thanksgiving. It's so popular, it's competitive.
Yeah. No, it certainly is, but I mean, there are...
I guess you could host one yourself, and then you beat the competition.
Yeah, but then you kind of got to be in, like, the right area, and I think there's all sorts of, like, rules about doing that. You know what I mean?
Sure. It's a bigger undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, but then you look at stuff, like, if we're doing the Charity Avenue, where it's in the public eye, like, the Hayes Boys going around and doing the Toys for Tots.
Yeah. I mean... I love what they're doing for Toys for Tots and everything else. I don't know if I would put that as like a community focused event, because it's the lodges like pulling together and donating a bunch, and then it's the Marines that are actually distributing the toys.
Sure.
Right? So as far as community involvement on that goes, we go to Fleet Farm and buy a bunch of toys, or those guys go to Fleet Farm and buy a bunch of toys. So, if you're branding and wearing Freemasonry stuff while you're out there buying all the toys, that's definitely a big plus. But if you want to talk about like community-driven events, like something that like a car show that's going to be right in the eye of the public, I don't know that I would throw Toys for Tots in there.
Something like, what would be interesting, like ones, have we heard of any other ones around the state that really draw the community in? Like something you can imagine the city knows about and they're excited about?
I don't know. You got a couple of those lodges that do like that. Which lodge is it that has the big chicken pot pie thing?
The chicken pies. I forget the name of the lodge, but I do know that the community loves their chicken pies.
Right, yep. And they have to make like, 1,000 of them that week or something like that. And it's just absolutely insane when it comes to that. And that's a great one. And I'm sorry if anybody from that lodge is listening and I can't recall the name of your lodge right now. But, I hear you guys do a wonderful job with that. I'm sure there's some of them out there that we know nothing of. I feel like this is a good question for our listeners to actually give us some feedback on if there's any of those type events that they've heard of going around the state that we haven't talked about.
Yeah. All right, I got an idea. Do you think this could be a popular community-driven event?
Oh boy.
So, you know how up in Green Bay they do the booyah, big soup, that massive pot?
Yeah.
I was thinking what could be a cool community event is in early cold season, not heart of winter, but when it's getting cold, do an outdoor Packer booyah event where you sell tickets for donations for drinks, and you have booyah, and then you set out like fire pits around the parking lot, and you have like a blow-up screen to watch a Packer game. You put out Packer stuff around the parking lot, and it's open to the community to come in and buy booyah, and come and hang out and watch a Packer game.
That could be kind of fun. That could definitely be interesting. It would require a lot of pre-planning. Like, that's something that you'd have to start planning like this fall for like next year.
Yep. I think all of these type of events that I'm imagining are all like the car show. They're planning year round.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing I've been interested in toying in my head is, can every lodge have the motivation to put on something like a car show? Rhinelander, I guarantee, all year is prepping and talking about their haunted house. Like, that's not a big Burns dinner. That is a big ordeal.
Right. And the hardest part of establishing something like that is the first one, right? If you haven't done it before, getting everything up and running for that first one is the hardest part, and then after that you kind of have a little bit of your roadmap or a blueprint. Yeah.
Trestle board.
Yeah. And you can tweak then from there what worked, what didn't work, and everything else. But it's still, I mean, even look at our open house. That's become, a year-round thing to, have the committee members from all the different bodies meet, make sure everybody's still good with kicking in the same amount of money, figuring out what we're going to buy to make it a little bit better each year, and things like that. So it's definitely, and we only draw like 150 people to that right now.
Yep.
I mean, but it's definitely building that momentum where it's good that we're laying a good foundation and thinking about it year round now for in future years when hopefully it's bringing in 300 people, right?
Yep. I mean, the key is, I think, is having something that the community would like to do that they get excited about doing. I'll notice other groups they'll cook brats at the 4th of July, and they'll do stuff like that, and kind of like how we're now doing a booth at Chill on the Hill.
Right.
But I'm trying to think, what else could we think of as ideas for, a big event, a big draw?
That's a really solid question, one that I'm not going to be able to answer quickly, and my attention's divided anyways since I'm the one driving.
I wonder. Or, I
kind of like the Packer game thing, like an outdoor tailgate type deal.
Yep, and you could advertise that over, and then it'd be outdoor with... I like the idea of having, you buy a bunch of wood, so there's, fires... tell people to stay warm, and a big pot of hot soup, and just watching a game.
You'd have to hope the Packers are doing well that year. Your crowd draw is going to be somewhat based on whether or not they're a competitive team.
Well, and the nice thing about our lodge is we're so close to 2 bars that we have, a decent relationship with both of them.
Yeah.
That you could kind of advertise over there, and I'm sure we could get those animals to come over.
Right.
And come visit us, and it could be a big thing. I mean, we also it's another fun one that Jan Talaga was talking to me about. He said, you guys should be a fun event to do at Lake, and I said, or at the Lake Masonic building. He said like a rummage-orama open to the community, where he's like, you would just you would have booth spaces available.
Right.
And you would sell them at a small amount. So, you buy a booth, and then you can sell. Then you would sell, like, you'd have a brat stand or something set up for the lodge to sell food or something, or drinks or whatever to people visiting.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting idea, too. Like, I think in Cedarburg, we had one big one like that in the State Fairgrounds called the Rummage-A-Rama.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, there's a few of those, not necessarily put on by Masonic lodges, but there's a few of those that go on around the state. Yeah, you charge like $20 a table or whatever, and people show up hoping that they'll make more, sell more than the $20 they spent on the table.
By drawing everyone to one spot.
Right. And, I've wanted to try that on a more Masonic level, because I know all of our lodges have multiple copies of the same books, sometimes 7 or 8 of the same book or set of books and stuff like that. And we all have like Masonic regalia and stuff like that. And I thought it'd be really cool to have lodges or individual Masons come in with stuff they're looking to get rid of under like the same idea, almost do like a Masonic book and used regalia sale or something.
Yeah, because we also collect like lots of quote unquote antiques, some that have historical value and a lot that do not.
Right.
Like when you get someone's collection of pins, pins are complicated because they usually have more value to the individual than they do to anyone else. But you could have like a whole table of just pins that you've acquired that, like, some of them are maybe, let's say you get 200 pins, probably 10 of them are worth maybe going in the archives or in a display case, but most of them are just pins. And so you can put all these types of little things that we collect along the way for Masons who actually would like to appreciate them with. For us, we just find storage, we just shove them in a closet with other things, and then it just takes up space.
Right. And then that's one of those things again where, like, if we hosted it at Lake, we could, if you do it when the weather's nice, you could have the grill going, serving up some burgers and stuff, everything else,
A Masonic meat swap.
Just get, people, $20 to have a table there, sell what you can, make sure we're inviting lodges from even the districts around, right? Stuff like that. I thought that would be a really fun idea to do, and, something that would help reduce the burden of some of the things we have as well, right? Your library starts getting crammed and you're like, why do we have 7 sets of Cloudy's Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason book? Do we need 7, or is like 3 an okay
And
number?
does a lodge not have any and they would benefit from having them?
Right.
Yep. Kind of like spread the wealth around a little bit of, like, if you, some people get like a massive book dump. We've got like 3 of those.
Yeah.
Like, here's 200 books, and you're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I would need to expand the library.
Right. And, and don't, charge an obscene amount of money for any of the stuff you're selling, right? Sell it for what it's worth,
Well, those Cloudy sites are tricky because those are worth like $500.
The little 3-book set?
No. Those are back in print. They're a little bit less. Those are worth like $50.
Right.
They're still expensive, the original prints, depending where you get
You're
it.
talking about Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry.
Or the History of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Those are pricey books.
Yeah, those full sets of those can go for quite a bit.
I've seen it go up to like 1,000 something.
I've seen them advertised for over 1,000. Depends on the condition, but yeah.
Yep. Or the year or whatever the print.
Yeah, what print version it is. Yeah, it can get pretty insane in Masonic book collecting.
It's true. It'd be another fun event.
What's that?
A big Oktoberfest outdoor celebration. I feel like all my ideas have to be outdoor because I feel like outdoor gives you the visibility that people can see you passing by. And be like, oh, maybe, and you have a sign that says like, open to the public, come on down. So people walking by are like, oh, let's stop in.
I do like the idea of like an Oktoberfest celebration. All I'm going to say is you're going up against like 3 really established Oktoberfest celebrations.
Are those for the public? Oh, that's true. But you just got to pick another weekend.
Bavarian Beer House does one.
Everyone does one.
There's a few other places, yeah.
That's true. That is true. But I mean, some people don't want to travel downtown. If you're looking at your local community, they might be like, oh, nice. I mean, some of these ideas, too, are good for lodges that are not in Milwaukee that might like to be like, oh, we'd love to do an Oktoberfest in like our small community. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm talking big ideas in general for the world from the car think tank.
The car think tank. I like it. I do like it. I am slightly distracted, though. Thankfully, traffic's light for the moment. We're just cruising, trying to make a deadline that we're going to be cutting it tight on. How did it get to be 4:30 already? Holy cow.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, while you're distracted, I'm going to try to throw harder questions at you.
All right, fun.
What do you think Masonry really needs right now to really flourish?
Energy and passion.
Okay. How do we cultivate energy and passion?
Be excited about the things you're doing. Don't come into Lodge being a sourpuss and talking about, oh yeah, we got this event coming up and this event coming up, and it's going to be a lot of work, but it's what we do. Like, no, like, hey, who's excited to get on this event? Get it planned. Let's do this. It's going to be successful. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be hanging out the whole time, having fun, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's work, but it's also fun, and this is what the Lodge needs to do, right?
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like some people get burned out, and then they lose their enthusiasm, and I feel like it's important to, like, really, I mean, we've talked about in the past, take pride in your Lodge and get excited. Like, sometimes you're not going to be in the mood. You just have to make yourself in the mood.
Yeah, let's be honest, sometimes you have to put on the face that you're excited about it, right? Like,
fake it till you make it.
yeah, sometimes. I mean, genuinely you want to be excited about stuff, but we're all going to have that, like, off day where, like, you're just like, I'm just not feeling this today, but you know what? I got to be there. I got to bring the energy. I got to figure out how that looks, right?
It might also be a good piece of advice. If you're not excited for the event, try to think about why aren't you excited, and try to make it an event that makes you excited.
Right.
Because some events, like this year, we're trying to make our award ceremony, honors and awards night, more exciting.
Yeah.
Because that was one where I was like, this event's stupid. I was like, it's not a stupid idea, but it's stupid in practice because we just were there for 10 minutes. We read out some names for people who weren't in attendance to go, well, they're getting an award mail. So then it goes, well, if this is lame, what would make it not?
Right.
And that's why, like, Jeff this year, that was an idea that we've been talking about for a couple of years. Is like, we're going to be doing a meal. It's going to be done up more. It's going to be more exciting.
Yeah.
I think, what I'm going to add during my year, now that it's more established with some of the, I'd say, corrections that he's making. Mm-hmm. My work does this thing where the master comes up with a bunch of silly awards and then sends out a survey to the membership to vote people for each one. So that could be like, most likely to grumpiest pastmaster award, or
most likely to sit in the north.
Yeah, or most likely to fall asleep in a meeting. Like, like these funny ones where it'd be like, I kind of want to add like a roast element to it.
Yeah, no, that could be really fun. Actually, I had thought about kind of venturing into that road a little bit. I mean, I added a couple awards in my year, but they were more like serious awards. But, the beauty of it is you can make up any award you want, right, for Honors and Awards Night. Like, the Lodge is giving out the award, so if you want to have a, worst dressed award, you can have a worst dressed award.
I'm thinking of, like, the Dundies from The Office. That's what I want.
Right.
Stinkiest Bowel Movement Award.
The Whitest Sneakers Award, yeah. Shiniest Shoes.
Like, you can think of some fun ones, and you'll see, like, I'd like there to be, like, man, if there could be, like at the start, like, you'd put it in place where it'd start with, like, a couple of silly awards, and then, like, in the middle, there could be, like, a master's roast where they roast the master, because towards the end of the year.
Right.
Roast the Worshipful Master segment, where people sign up in advance to do a roast. Have some roast things to go up with, and then you'd go a couple of silly, then you'd build up to the serious awards, and then try to make it like more of a a fun, but also like a night that people want to come out for to get like the good awards too.
Well, yeah, no, that would definitely add a different element to it. I think it would make the program a little longer, which is not a bad thing, you know. And I think, were we talking about having our ladies be able to come to it this year too? Was that the other facet?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, you should, right? Like, they've been there supporting you the whole time. Even if you're getting a silly award, they're probably somewhat responsible for it.
Yep. And then I want to, you know, and since booze is allowed now, I'd like there to be like drinks there, like where it's like a celebration event. It's not a stuffy lodge meeting. It's a celebration of people. It's an opportunity to laugh at one another.
Right.
And, like, you know, I think that would draw people more, too.
Laugh with one another would be a better way of putting that,
yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, laugh at them. Laugh at your friends. What's better than that?
Right.
And, but, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, you know, it says you increase the length, and it's like, but the thing is, you know, it pisses me off more than anything? Blocking out a night for a 15-minute meeting.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, especially people have to drive in. You're like, I'm not driving in for 10 minutes, dude.
Right, yeah.
Like, give me something to come down for.
That whole night last year for me was like so awkward. I was just like, what are we even doing here? Like, I could have given these awards out at the pub.
Yeah. I could have given out as stated at that point.
Right.
You need to build something around it. But I think that's a good point is like when you're looking at your events, if there's something you're not excited for, think of a different version that includes it that you would be excited for, or replace it altogether if it's not exciting.
Well, yeah, if it's getting, you know, a little bit stale, maybe it's time to change something up about the event, or just like you said, replace it completely. Like, all right, everybody's kind of over this event now. What are we gonna do next?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that happens. Everything runs its course, right? Like. But you're gonna always have those staples where after 25 years they haven't run their course yet, and obviously you keep that one on the docket. But if something's naturally run its course after 5 or 6 years, there's nothing wrong with getting rid of it and replacing it with a new, fresher event. You know?
I've been having a challenge where I've been looking at the calendar and working on my calendar for next year, and one of my goals is to try to open the calendar up a bit so that some of these younger brothers that we're bringing in, because we have so many new faces, have room to create something of their own and something fresh. And so I've been trying to wrestle with that challenge of like, where do things need to be fresh and where are things good? What is an annual event versus what is something that's just, you know, we don't have to always, I think people run a thing where you do it once, you go, let's do this every year forever. And you're like, you need to shift things around, like,
right,
and think like, hey, this could be every couple of years you do this thing, and then this like creates a freshness to it, while still also maintaining the traditional events that people love. Well, and that's been a challenge,
and that's why I started trying to tap into the Fifth Thursday thing a little bit more, like, and use those for like social events, because you're gonna get about 4 of those a year, right?
Yep.
That traditionally we're not gonna have anything planned on. Right, because it's the 5th Thursday. You might use it as a degree night if you absolutely had to. But you could also use it as a social night and have 4 different kinds of social events.
But then when those 4 get filled, then we're once again at the thing where there's no space for... Like, that's why I want to have some more rotation in that.
Some will be more successful than others, right?
Yep.
And if you see one that's kind of like, it's not really drawing the interest of people, that goes, new idea comes in, you know. Or if you have a free night because we're for some reason not doing a bunch of degree work for once, then you fill it with one of those new ideas, and if it's wildly successful, then maybe you bump something else, right?
Yep. The other challenge I've been dealing with is during my junior warden year, there's a chunk of our calendar that becomes pretty condensed to the point of being very hard to manage as a junior warden, and I'm trying to see if there might be a way to smooth things around slightly to open up a little breathing room in that space, but it's tough.
It is tough. I mean, we put on a large number of events, and there's bound to be a clog in the pipeline there at some point, right?
Yep.
And that's just a matter of, like, I think I know which month you're talking about. You have, like, an event, then you have stated the next week, and then you have...
now.
It's what?
It's basically this quarter is, like, the hard quarter.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right, yeah. We're moving into the hard quarter, I should say, you know. But... there's one month in particular where you have, a big event followed by a stated meeting the next week, followed by a dinner after that, right? And the way I managed it, honestly, when I was junior warden was that was the month that we're ordering pizza for dinner.
Yep.
This way the large event gets handled. I don't have to worry about what I'm cooking for that meeting.
Yep.
And just, boom, can move on.
The fact of the matter is, though, is if you have two big events in the same month, it ends up turning into your attention's divided as the junior warden. And so you struggle to do either well, is what I've found, because you're doing one and you can't really do both at the same time because you can't really put your heart into either. That's why I want to try to look at the calendar and see if there's any wiggle room to make adjustments to create a little bit of separation so that the lodge can have time to put its full heart into one instead of split attention into two.
Well, I mean, I have another potential solution for you on it. You're a junior warden, you have two stewards that are working for you, right?
Yeah, but they're never going to always utilize that. And so there's a structure.
Part of leadership is delegating responsibility. So
I get that, but at the same time, I would still say there's a calendar problem when there's something like that going on. And if there's any way I can wiggle it, I'm going to try to wiggle it a little bit. But sometimes that's the challenge.
Good luck, because you don't really want to hammer major events in the middle of summer, right? Because people are off doing family vacations and stuff like that, which might make it more difficult for you to get the attendance, right? And then your other months start filling up pretty quick too.
Yeah, there has to be a way.
Okay.
There has to be. Otherwise, the thing is too is when those events are clumped together that close, attendance suffers because people are like, I'm just here. You know what I mean?
I don't know if I would agree with the attendance suffering problem necessarily.
Well, I mean, for example, in that one, when you look at it, the challenge is the past master dinner is so close to that, and that one has been having suffering attendance for years. I struggled to get my minimum last year, and I think it's because
what was the minimum though? Like 50 people?
30.
30. All right.
So there's, to me, I go, if the things are too bang 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 close together, sometimes people are like, you guys, I can't do this much in a month. And so I think there has to be some sort of adjustment or pivot made on scheduling to try to open up people's time a little bit.
Okay, but if you move the past masters dinner to October, you run into the same problem.
Yeah, no, that's where I'm going to have to investigate.
Because you have a stated meeting and you have the spaghetti dinner. If you move it into November, you're coming up against Thanksgiving.
Yep.
If you move it into December, you're up against installation season and breakfast with Santa.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
January is Burns.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
That's what I'm saying, dude. I don't know that there's anywhere you could move it that would make it easier.
What about Fifth Thursday?
Yeah, but then that's going to be sporadic. So one year it might be. But even if you move it to a Fifth Thursday, your Fifth Thursday could be in September.
Yeah.
And then you're running into the same problem because now, and then it's even closer to the next stated and spaghetti.
That's what I'm saying. It's a challenge.
Right. I'm telling you, I tried to solve that problem.
We got to do something. Yeah, but that's the thing is like I think we have to find like a way to circumscribe and find balance somewhere in there, and I just don't know how to do it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult with our calendar. When you look at our calendar, it is really difficult. Between that and then district meetings and stuff like that, like it ends up becoming a real challenge to try to lay it out in a way that there's not going to be a moment where somebody's scrambling and has a little too much on their plate at once, right? But that's also going to happen, and it's only for 1 year.
Yeah. I always thought maybe with the past masters dinner, if we can reestablish a past masters club,
they could handle the planning of it. Yeah.
And get a budget, and that would pull it out, and that would solve all those problems, and have the most recent
the
past master,
junior past master,
be the chair.
Yeah.
And I thought that'd be a good way to not only keep them involved before they passed out, which is a term we learned the other day, where they disappear into the wind after they've served their time.
Oh, right, yeah.
Keep them trapped.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would definitely keep them engaged, and I think bringing back the Past Masters Club isn't a bad idea. You know, we have to wait till you're a past master to do that, but
like 6 months. Well, past master the moment I'm master of the lodge, allegedly.
Yep. You are. As soon as you get installed, you're technically a past master because you've been installed as a master.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I do have my virtual past master degree.
Yeah, that doesn't count. That doesn't count.
Yeah, I know. They explain that explicitly.
York right with that weirdness because you technically used to have to be a past master to move through those degrees.
I really like that degree, though.
No, it was a good degree.
It's short, snappy, but it's got a lot of good information.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So, all right. I guess now I'm at the turn of the back nine before I have to go into the year. I have a lot of planning in my head, but I don't have a lot on paper, and I keep writing on my calendar to do, and then I keep pushing it because I'm a procrastinator. I need to really buckle down.
You do need to buckle down. This is a good conversation now that we're off the freeway, too, and on the back roads and in God's country.
The thing is so a lot of the ideas, like, it's not that I haven't been thinking about it. I want to get it on paper. So the things that I need, and help me make sure I'm right, I need to make sure I have my installation crew lined out.
And your script.
My script buttoned up. My calendar buttoned up, which is, we just explained why I've been struggling with that because I've been racking my brain on it.
Yep.
What am I missing?
Your budget.
Budget's going to be, I think, when do you usually meet on that? Third quarter?
I wouldn't start meeting. I would meet with Brad with it in like September, October.
Yeah, third quarter.
You're going to want to
quarter.
present it to the lodge in November so it can be voted on in December.
Yep. And that's really all I need to get pre-prepped, right? And then officers' meetings scheduled.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, you're going to want to definitely like your calendar out there and stuff like that. Your calendar as soon as possible so people can start booking those dates now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll have it up by next dated, I think, and just have it. I'll just set it out for print some copies so that people can just get that already in their stuff or something.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so is it bad that now that we're turning the back nine, or turning the pike, the anxiety's hitting me?
No, it 100% should be. And this is probably nothing you don't know, but this will hopefully get you to stop procrastinating. The anxiety gets lessened if you have your plan in front of you.
That's a good point.
And you know your plan, right? I planned super early, and I found that my anxiety was reasonably manageable right up until the day of installation, and then my anxiety hit hard.
Oh, God. It's just far enough away that it, like, floats in the corner of my mind.
Flowers for installation.
Flowers.
Yeah.
I need to get my hat.
Oh, yeah. Your hat would be that would be a good thing to start working on.
I put Claire on the gavel, but she's procrastinating that, too.
Yeah. Both of those things you should probably start working on, because if elected, you're gonna want both of those things there,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's weird because at this midway point, it's close, but it's still kind of far away, but not really. But it is and
not
isn't
far away at all.
I mean, it's half a year away, but that goes fast too.
Oh yeah, that goes super fast, especially with how active we are and how busy we are, and at the same time, you still have your senior warden stuff to check off the list and be able to say, I completed it, right? So,
what's my senior warden stuff?
Well, I mean,
is there paperwork that you do?
No.
Oh, thank God.
But I'm just saying, like, your mental checklist of things you're doing as senior warden, right? The wellness calls, the widow stuff. That's all stuff you don't want to leave unfinished for the next senior warden.
Oh,
right?
yeah, and then prep the stuff to hand over to him so that he can be set up for success, too. Ugh.
So the sooner you have your plan for next year in place, the easier it is to make sure that you're completing all your senior warden responsibilities and your it'll lessen your anxiety about your year as well.
Yeah, I need to get that done. It's giving me anxiety.
Yeah, it would be giving me anxiety too if it was June, and I mean,
plenty of time.
I had my calendar done pretty quick, and my script was the hardest thing because I had to pull like 4 different scripts together. But
now I'm just stealing yours. Easy.
Right.
Easy clap.
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's build off of what the people before you created, and it makes life a little bit easier.
I'm going to add to my officers thing. I think I'm going to do my 3rd quarter officer meeting like Jeff and do it at my house and try to make that a tradition. Go to the master's house and have a casual
cookout.
Yeah, like a cookout.
Meeting.
Yeah.
Wives invited and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
It'll work better if your air conditioning's fixed, but yeah.
Now we're gonna get toasty. Do it on the patio.
I don't want to have a sweat lodge.
Hell yeah, we are. It's gonna be called the sauna meeting. We're gonna lose some toxins. Is there anything else that you think I should be preparing for besides the ritual stuff? I probably should start looking at the MM degree.
Yeah, you should start looking at that. Obviously, your openings and closings, balloting. Really, the balloting.
I need to do it 3 times. Remember when you guys tortured me?
Yeah, I know. But so make sure you have it down.
Yep.
And another big one is think in your give yourself hypotheticals in your head. Like, if a discussion starts going bad in lodge and I have to wrap somebody down or something like that, what's that going to look like? How am I going to react to that? What's that? You know what I mean? Prepare yourself for the hypotheticals. You know
what's been helping me with some of those thoughts? That YouTube video that our listener and friend Brian sent in the Discord on Rob's Rule of Order. That guy has lots of videos. And he actually has a full course on how to run a meeting effectively using those Rob's Rule of Order.
Yeah.
And I am going to take that course because even those small videos, like the ability to use a consent agenda, we should be using that for a lot of our stuff. We use it technically when we do our minutes. Mm-hmm. That's a consent agenda. Right. If anyone says I object or I do have a revision to the minutes, it technically would have to actually go back to a motion and then go through the whole process. I was telling our worshipful master about that, and I was like, some of these ones where it's just it doesn't seem like it'd be something that would require a lot of discussion. You could ask for a consent agenda and say, I would motion by consent that we approve this.
Right.
And then if someone just says object, then that doesn't mean they're objecting to your motion or your agenda. It means they would like it to go to discussion at least first.
You could wrap the secretary's report, or the minutes, the trustees' report, and your treasurer's report all into a consent agenda.
But you can also do if there was something that you knew was just there's probably not going to be any discussion, and then all those ones that we go any discussion, no discussion, vote by the side, those ones that are back to back where there's no discussion.
Right.
You can just say I'd like to go via consent this, and then any objection approved, and then it's just done because then if there's no objection, it's approved.
I've sat in a couple lodges that do the consent agenda thing, and they'll do it for your standard stuff, your minutes, your treasurer's report, your trustees' report, right? And they'll just leave it at that. That's all they'll do the consent for. And in my personal opinion, those are the only, and they wrap it together as one big thing. Is there any objection to these 3 things?
Yep.
If there's not, boom, you're done, right?
Yep.
And I like that idea for those 3 things, but I would never want to do it for something else the lodge is voting on. Then I actually want to see the hands.
The thing is though, it's the same as the hand. So you can propose it for anything, and all it has to do is if one person disagrees, they go object, then you go okay, now there's and then you go right back into the normal thing. So you're basically asking anyone, does anyone actually really care to talk about this? And they go nope, and you go away we go. Then it's done. So it's a nifty tool to have in the toolbox. But then that opened up. We do so many things incorrectly with Rob's Rules of Order.
Yeah, we're not Robert's Rules of Order specialists.
Yeah, but I think that one thing that I want to start doing is tidying that up a little bit.
What?
the fact, so like, I always thought it was weird that there'd be like 3 people standing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, in no time in this type of meeting can someone hold their place in line by standing. They go, the chairman may note that, and they can honor or not honor that order, and generally they do, but it's up to the master's discretion. And it's something that clicked to me that you're supposed to stand and announce, so it's whoever speaks first, not whoever stands first, like, worshipful master.
Right.
And then they pause, and then they wait to be addressed. So if 2 people say it at the same time, the master looks around and goes, so-and-so, the other person sits. Because he might not stand again because his point has been said, right?
Right.
And so I was like, oh, that does tidy some of that confusion up a little bit and stuff like that. So I kind of want to get a little parliamentarian next year and really tighten it up a little bit.
I don't have a problem with that. You know that.
Yep.
Well, and
like
me to learn
a motion and a sub-motion, right? Like if you want to do an amendment to the motion, did you know, we always get a little funky with that. You know how that works? So if there's a motion on the floor and someone proposes an amendment to the motion,
then you have to get a second to the amendment, have discussion about the amendment. The amendment's either approved or denied by a vote, and then you can go back to the original motion.
Yeah, it goes down, and then that has to be fully resolved. If it's yes or no, and if it's no, you go back to the first one, and then you start over. And then there might be an amendment that comes down again and goes back up. And so, like that stuff, I feel like every lodge likes to try to use some sort of handed-down version of Rob's Rule of Order, but over time, no one has refreshed on what it is, so they're just using whatever kind of version they've been taught. And that, so it's like the game of telephone we talk about, where it gets a little catawampus in some places.
Right.
And that I feel like having, God, I wish we could have a lodge parliamentarian.
That would be interesting. But then you'd have to have somebody that would be extremely knowledgeable about Rob's Rules of Order, and,
I wonder if we could...
How often, let me ask you this, to justify having like a lodge parliamentarian, how often does it really come up in lodge?
I guess what I'm actually saying, it might be a good thing? I might add on one of my requests to my senior warden is, so I'm going to take this course. It costs $20, and it's 4 hours. Mm-hmm. It's broken up into like 5 sub-courses, that my senior warden take that course, and that the lodge pay the $20 for them to take it. And say, hey, so that the person prepping to be master always understands the basic structure, so that every year, like, there's somebody who's like, I get it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Because that also helps you as far as your confidence in running a meeting, is knowing what your authority entails in the meeting and how to use it correctly,
Right.
That'd be cool. I've been really nerding out over parliamentarian stuff.
I can tell. I mean, we should be. We have a special project we have to work on.
I know. Yeah, we're going to have to call in our boy Ryan for that.
Oh, yeah.
and John.
And worshipful brother John, yeah.
Yep,
they're both going to have to come in for the assist on that one.
I know. Sure. We'll be the new parliamentarians by the end of that.
Oh, God. Don't make me a parliamentarian.
Well, actually, you need a 2/3 vote on that type of resolution. Oh, okay, sorry.
Nope. I have...
Well, actually, it's on the table, not under the table.
I don't want to be a specialist. I just want to know enough to be dangerous.
That's the same. That's the same. I want just the same. I feel like I've seen so many times where, like, something weird happens in, like, a resolution process, and then we all, like, what do we do now?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, or, wait, did that get done right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, are we doing this the right way, or...
Right.
Yeah, it can be confusing. But I feel like the more people are able to get educated on that, the more the meetings can flow quickly, because everyone understands their place and how to interact with it, too.
Right. I would agree. I mean... Look, Rob's Rules of Order exist purely to keep things moving along, limit frivolous discussion, and keep emotion somewhat at check, right? So
and to give everyone what they feel is a voice.
Right.
That they can find consent amongst a group.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
I know, and I feel like some people feel like it's too ritualistic and clunky. But we've all been in those meetings where it's just like not productive.
Right. And, you know, having a set of guidelines that you understand keeps you from looking foolish if things aren't going the right way, and then you get a bunch of people going, oh, I don't think you handled that the right way. You know, but when you can point back to something and be like, actually, no, according to this, I did handle it the right way, you know.
And it makes people feel like their voices is heard properly and that they're able to express themselves. You know, the other tip that I really like from those videos, similar to Grand Lodge, they recommend, they go, any new chairman can benefit from the switching back and forth between, is there anyone who is for this amendment, and then switch to anyone who's against. Because what can happen is 3 people will say the same thing in a row, and you're just like, why?
Right.
And so what you do is you'd say, all right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion in favor of this resolution?
Right.
Someone stands, you pick that person, they make their point, and you go, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to stand opposed to this opposition, who would like to speak?
Right.
And so you can start as a room to get a pulse on the floor. So if there's 5 people who are going to speak in favor and they notice no one stood up in opposition,
right,
they might go, oh, I don't think I need to stand up because I can tell right now how this vote's going to go.
Right. Exactly.
And you can tell how contentious it is. And then so you go, okay, no one stands in opposition. So is there anyone else who would like to speak? And then you switch back and forth till people stop standing up.
Right.
And then you go, all right, now we'll vote. And so, you know, at Grand Lodge, they did 3 for, 3 against to try to make it more expedient.
Yeah.
But in a lodge, what you'll see is when people can start to get a consensus of what is on the floor based on who's standing to speak for it against, people don't feel the need to rehash the same thing over and over.
Right.
And then it goes to a vote faster. That's something I'm definitely going to do.
Fair. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that, so... it streamlines the process, right? Anybody in favor? 3 people stand up. Anybody opposed? Nobody stands up. All right, cool.
Let's go to a vote.
Yep.
When they get to speak. But then it allows, too, that you can get the juxtaposition of the conversation. Like, when someone speaks against, now the people who are for are probably going to have something to rebuttal that. And anyone is only allowed to stand up twice. They can stand up once, and they can stand up a second time if they want to clarify based on what someone else said. And no one is able to speak to that brother. They have to address it to the master to keep it civil.
Right, exactly. And as, you know, you don't have a vote unless it comes to a tie next year, sitting in the East. So I'll have to remember that and this conversation, plus our previous conversation for the future where, you know, I make sure somebody in favor of something, if I like it, speaks last, because then I know which way you'll vote.
Easily sold. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. And like, I think it's what I like about it the most is that in Masonry, we always want to say that, like, you know, there's an order to things. And so we try to create an order in Lodge to reflect the order of the universe, right? And so by doing it well, you're creating a structured order, which is very Masonic. Like walking in square corners, like everything has a place and a plan, and it's very orderly. And like by having proficiency in doing clear and accurate, good meetings through that structure, it's very Masonic feeling.
Oh yeah, for sure, I agree. And I mean, you know, we try to do it at Grand Lodge, you know, via that type of style and Rob's rules of order and all that. So why aren't we doing it at a lodge level? Right.
Well, and think about it, Grand Lodge. There's so many people that could be a real chaotic meeting, and it's not. It's kept pretty organized throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it goes pretty quickly for what it could be with that many hooligans, as Masonic hooligans in the room, shouting from the stands. Like, it keeps it tidy.
Yeah.
And then it goes quicker, so there's just not as much. Even though, you know, they reduce it to 3 for, 3 against, I do think that should be a little softer. They also put the time limit on, which I appreciate. Because you should be able to say your point condensed enough. Because there's no reason whatever you're trying to explain should take 30 minutes to explain.
My issue with the time limit is...
It wasn't consistent.
If you're going to have a time limit, you got to cut people at the time limit. You can't let them go 4 minutes and then the next person 3 minutes. And you got to start a watch when somebody starts talking, right?
Yep. Minimum at the 2-minute mark, you say, brother, you're at your mark. Can you please finish your thought?
Right. Yep.
And then you give them the warning, like the music, the get off the stage music.
Well, and I would agree with that. You hit your 2 minutes. I will let you conclude your thoughts. You have 30 seconds, right?
Well, and if you find that everyone is hitting their minutes too quickly, you could always bump it up to 3 and then start it there and say close enough. And, or if you know it's a more, I don't know, I have a hard time with the minute count. Some people can be too long-winded. I wonder what the perfect number is because, hey, look at...
Yeah, it's Victor.
We have a sign and my brother's on a billboard.
Yep.
Shout out to Victor Magnus.
Business. Woo, Victor Magnus.
How we know we're in town is we see a billboard with a brother on it.
No, we're still decently outside of town, but yes, we're getting close.
That's awesome. But yeah, I think, it's a good system. And I think I really want us to, we always say that at our lodge we should be trying to do everything at the highest level. That's another avenue. If you're like, what can we tidy up? That's a good one.
Right. No, that is a good one. And, we always talk as a lodge and as men about, what can we focus on to make ourselves better. And I feel like the lodge has done a very good job over the last couple of years picking 1 or 2 things to focus on to get better at and continue getting better at, So I think Rob's Rules of Order is the next one up.
Yep, that and our finances.
Right. If we would have been able to leave a little bit earlier, I would have ran you out to the hunted property, not to walk around, just to show you where the place is. But we gotta get to this dinner.
Yeah, we do. I'm hungry.
Yeah, and the hunted property is like another 10 to 12 minutes past where the lodge is.
Looks like it's about to storm out here.
It is. It definitely seems that way. Good stormy night for the Feast of St. John the Baptist.
For a thunderous man.
And a 2-part episode recorded until we cut out a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, you're going to have fun editing this one, buddy.
No, I'm not looking forward to it. What would you say is, speaking of things that, as a lodge, we're always trying to find new things to tidy up, what would be something you'd say we need to tidy up?
I think the Rob's Rule of Order is actually a legitimate one that we could really use some work on and hit right now. I think we've taken care of, we brought practices back for degrees, which, I know don't always work with people's schedules, but I felt that was something that needed to be done last year. I think, we're shoring up the widows list this year, which is a good thing.
Yep.
And we're getting really good at our wellness checks and stuff like that, especially for brothers we haven't seen in a while. Everything's trending in the right direction. One of my personal pet projects is I want to see people's rod work and dew guards and signs shore up a little bit, because I feel like we got a little lax with that, and I want to get us back to being extraordinarily crisp at that. And that's something that's just working with those, working with people on. And we have a lot of good things going on, and over the last since I became a Mason, I've seen everything at that lodge trend in the right direction, and I'm excited to see it continuing to trend that way.
I think what we need, what we've been talking about that we're still polishing up, is getting a capital fund put in place, which is something that you talked about up here when you were at your leadership meeting.
Yeah, well, there's a different presenter that talked about it up here. Yeah.
You were at the presentation talking about that, yes.
Yeah, but no, I definitely think that's something that if your lodge doesn't have one, you need to start thinking about it. If you own your building, is, how are you going to ensure that the funds are there for a roof, or for a parking lot, or for windows for the guys 30 years from now?
I think that's something that we are learning now as someone who's dealing with a capital project that we have to set up now.
Right.
Because we didn't have it set up 30 years ago. And the next best time is now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the other thing I'm looking at is I think that as a lodge, we do our best to help with relief, but it's a strain right now to be able to adequately provide relief. So I want to try to explore options.
Like doing like an almoner's fund?
More or less. But a relief, like similar, like I like to view that a lodge should be a microcosm of what the Grand Lodge is doing.
Right.
And we can't do it at their level. That's what they're used for. But, you know, for
Right.
example, to get service and assistance from the Grand Lodge, oftentimes they'll ask to have you reach out to your lodge first.
Right.
So I'd like to make that step more effective
Right.
and quick. And so I want to see if there's a way we can, similar to a capital fund, break out an investment fund that helps with those things. That's going to be in the budget meeting with Brad.
You should, okay, outside of like trying to break out, I mean, there is a portion in the lodge budget that exists for that, but maybe there should be more of the investment set aside for that, right?
That's what I'm thinking. For widows too.
Right. If you want to have an interesting conversation with a lodge that has started doing, kind of working on something to emulate like what Grand Lodge does. Damascus actually has a charity and service and assistance committee now.
Wow.
That they wrote like their own rules for determining, you know, how and when they would give money out, how much they would give out, and how much they could give out without lodge approval.
So I believe we have something in our bylaws related to how much we can give out with lodge approval, or that's just general?
That's just generally how much we can spend. This was limited in the authority of that committee in particular to say, like, hey, look, if you're looking at spending more than $2,000 or, you know, giving somebody, because, you know, a lot of times with service and assistance,
it might be fast needed.
It might be A, fast needed, or B, the person doesn't really want it all their dirty laundry out there, right?
Yep.
So it was up to X number of dollars that they could decide the lodge would give somebody without bringing it before the lodge, right?
Yep.
You know.
And yeah.
But there's guidelines established, much like for Grand Lodge's service and assistance. There's guidelines established laying out how you know, qualifications to be able to receive money from it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to them because I really like this idea, and I think it's going to come up. And as relief being one of our tenants, we need to be able to quickly and without burdening and cannibalizing just our membership, as a collective, as a lodge, we should be able to act on those types of things. And, you know, like the Grand Lodge Fund, like they have more money than they're able to give out. I wouldn't say we'd be able to have that much wealth, but to start building for the future, where if they're during the good times, you should be saving for that, and during the bad times, then you can give relief, right?
Right.
And so I think trying to have that in place, so 30 years from now, there's something that's building money for that purpose would be essential to a lodge functioning at the highest level.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, part of this is having a conversation with our financial advisor about,
can you earmark stuff?
Can we earmark stuff but have it still be
in the same
part of the whole, because a whole is going to produce more return, right?
Yep.
Than a little fund trying to produce returns on its own.
Yeah, you'll let me know how it goes with the capital improvement, because if that goes well, that could be a similar idea that I could use to start this fund off, because we have a general charity fund, but that's used for it's too broad of a thing that it's hard to pull from for that type of thing. So it'd be nice to earmark something for other options for as far as relief and widows support.
Right. No, I agree. And I mean, that would be a good thing to get set up, and we just got to figure out, you know, how and why and where the initial funds to set this stuff up is going to come from, you know. And, you know, I think that's all doable, and I think we have a membership that is very amicable to these kind of things, and, you know, they see that we're trying to keep the building up, and we're not, you know, being dumb with how we're doing it. We're not just spending crazy amounts of money, you know, but we're doing what needs to happen, and also trying to future plan at the same time. So.
Yep, we're trying to give people the lodge in 30 years that we weren't given, because we build on our, you know, the past experience, right? And there's probably things that they built on that we were given that hasn't been handed down. So we're trying to look in the nooks and crannies and going, what gift can we give our future brothers from this lodge that we were not given, so that they have an easier time, and that, you know, I feel like that's how you legacy build, and you plan for the future with that type of stuff.
Well, agreed. I mean, it's the same idea that I took with my daughter's financial future. You know, she's got a bunch of money sitting in a custodial account right now, and I contribute to it weekly, you know, and like I'm trying to start her off in a better place than I was, right? And that's what we're all trying to do. And, you know, nothing against the guys that came 30, 40, 50, 60 years before us, but they didn't, you know, who could have predicted, how much costs of everything would go up over that amount of time and stuff like that, right? So, but, you know, they were like, well, we got money there, but we got this building, and, you know, it'll be good for...
It's brand new.
It's brand new. It'll be good for 60 years. Well, now we're at that 60 years, and now we're going, you know.
And we don't know what their finances look like at the time and what their capabilities were, so we have to act within our capabilities.
Right. So that 30 years from now, when the guys look back, they're not going, well, it would have been nice if you guys would have started, you know, an investment fund for us so we could have paid for all the stuff we need to do here. You know, and let's be honest, we're not the only lodge in that situation. I think that's more lodges are in that situation than are not.
Yep.
You know, and I think all of those lodges need to be thinking this way is, how can we make sure 30 years from now, and I'm talking about lodges that own buildings, obviously.
Yep.
How can we make sure 30 years from now, those guys don't have to go through the same thing we're going through now, right?
Yep. And the thing is, I think that's like something any good parent should like for their baby Masons, right?
Right.
Leave it better than you found it, set them up for success, and like that's you want the younger generation of Mason to be smarter than you, right? Because that means you're training, you're mentoring good Masons.
Right.
And so, you know, the only thing we can do is, while we're in that shoes, try to make the improvements we can make, and then pass it on, and then they'll do what they're going to do with that, and they'll make their improvements, and that's how Masonry survives into the next century.
Right. It comes down to always be training your replacement. That comes down to my Yoda quote that I feel like I've been throwing out, you know, way too much lately, of the we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters, right? Mm-hmm. Because you want the people under you to be better than you were, and if you don't, you gotta check your ego a little bit, to be pretty blunt about it, because that's what's getting in the way. Is if you don't want to see the person that comes after you do better than you, that's purely ego driven. Yep. And you need to check that, because
just do your passions.
The person coming after you, if they do better than you did, the lodge will be better for it. You know, it goes back to a rising tide raises all ships philosophy, right? You want everybody to be successful together, because then you'll all be successful together.
Yep, and then you don't attach, like, because I think what happens when you do something like that, people are like, you know, I did the best I could, and then they get defensive, and you're like, I'm not knocking you down, I'm trying to build up. And so, like, you know, no one's perfect, and no one's going to have made the perfect decision at the perfect time, but they're going to hand something to the next person, and it's your job to say, where did they do good and where is this deficient? And then where it's deficient, it's your job to improve, and where they did good, it's a blessing. And you go, thank you.
So this is Victor's in-laws.
Oh, wow. Well, with the rain coming down as hard as it is, and this close to our destination, I think this would be a good place to wrap.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And be sure to check us out on our socials. Give us a like, give us a comment, and check us out on Discord. All the information is in the show notes.
And stay tuned for the follow-up episodes, because we might just be recording on the way home.
Take care.
Have a good one.